What has a year of pandemic teaching taught the teachers? And are schools and their faculty and staff really ready to get back to class? Meeting these and other questions head-on is the Border Learning Conference. I'm Duke Keith, and this is El Paso Townsquare. Welcome to El Paso Townsquare. Speaking with Crystal Roberts, the steering committee chair for El Paso Community College's Border Learning Conference. And it's a little different for you guys this year because it's a big Zoom meeting. But Crystal, first of all, welcome, and we appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you about this important subject for El Paso educators, but something that's open to anybody who wants to play a part and just watch along.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, let's talk about the Border Learning Conference, and let me ask you first of all the pertinent info. What are the dates? When is it going to be? What kind of a date range does it cover?
The Border Learning Conference is traditionally held on one day from 8 to 4 p.m. However, this year, since we've moved virtual to a virtual platform on Zoom, we'll be hosting the Border Learning Conference on Thursday, April 8th, Friday, April 9th, and Saturday, April 10th. Our event begins on Thursday in the evening, approximately 5 o'clock in the evening, continues on Friday for midday from about noon till 4, and then on Saturday we are having our last session, a couple of sessions throughout the morning and early afternoon.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The conference, what this changes about the conference too is our registration fee, which is only $20.
Okay, and this is all to kind of help out the effort. It's a Border Learning Conference. It is for educators mainly, but it is something that is open to the public if you just kind of want to know the direction of things. And obviously, health is going to be an absolutely huge topic. By virtue of the fact that you are virtual this year.
By virtue of the fact that we're virtual, correct. Yes. We're focusing on health and actually in two very different ways. We have a panel made up of health professionals here on the border. We have the hospitalist from UMC. We have our city county medical authority, Dr. Ocoranza. We will also hear from family doctors, and also and as a unique flavor to it too, we'll also be hearing from those who are working on the vaccines in the lab. In one particular was from Mexico City. So we like to have medical health professionals. When we have our panelists, we like to have professionals from both sides of the border coming in to speak with us. So they're going to give us their views and discuss with us any pertinent information about reopening of our educational institutions, as well as our other public institutions. This offers a unique opportunity for our audience to be able to, who are usually made up of educators, to be able to ask questions of these medical professionals. Now, I said that we were going to be looking at health in two different ways. The other way that we're looking at health is we're looking at the mental health of educators. And our keynote speaker, Dr. Peter DeWitt, is a former teacher and principal, but he's also focused a great deal on a national level on the mental health of educators. And so his keynote address will discuss how we can, become aware of these issues and how we can best address these issues for ourselves and for our communities.
This is an absolutely tremendous thing going on, and very important, especially as schools begin to open up. I know some districts are different from others. Some are, if you want to go for in-person learning, you can, but most of it's still virtual. It's just kind of what you want to do in some places, and every district is a little bit different. But that's just in El Paso. What I love about this is that you cover both sides of the border, and I don't think there's anything that's more fundamental about our community other than the fact that it's a binational community, and you're focusing on what goes on in Ciudad Juarez as well as El Paso, Texas.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the Border Learning Conference, this is the 20th year for our Border Learning Conference.
Tremendous.
And it was started by EPCC faculty in collaboration with Doña Ana Community College faculty, because, as educators, we're encouraged to attend conferences where we can learn more about our craft. And in doing so, the founders of this of this conference kept running into the same kind of conundrums, where if they were attending an educational conference, they found themselves looking for items that were more specific to the border and to our students. And unfortunately, in most national conferences, what happens on the border are multicultural, multinational. Education is usually a novel. It's just, maybe one thread or the topic of one presentation. So that's why the Border Learning Conference was created those 20 years ago, to really focus on the things that affect our students most. Our students in the Community College 1 are different from other higher education students, right? We have what is the considered non-traditional student. However, the non-traditional student, but that's the majority of our students, and we're seeing that this non-traditional trend. And what I mean by non-traditional is when we think of traditional college student, you see your child growing up, 18, 19 years old,
right,
freshman heading to the dorms, still living under, still otherwise being supported by their parents. But that's not our students. Our
right.
students are sometimes over the age of 25, 35, up to 65 years, older than 65 years old. And we have, they've got very heavy responsibilities at home and at work. And so we'd like to see more about our border students and more about our region, what's affecting us. And in El Paso, we're so unique because we've had so many different issues that affect us, and do a great deal into our sister city Juarez. So those issues come to light at the Border Learning Conference.
This is tremendous. Speaking with Crystal Roberts, she's the steering committee chair for the EPCC Border Learning Conference, taking place Thursday, April 8th through Saturday, April the 10th. And it is all virtual this year. Usually, as Crystal has pointed out, it has been a one-day thing, kind of an all-day sucker, so to speak. But this is spread out over different hours at different times, because it's going to be a virtual meeting. And again, the keynote address spoken by Dr. Peter DeWitt, as this year you spoke, you talked about focusing quite a bit on the mental and emotional health of educators, which I would imagine, especially with different districts in different parts of the country opening up, is it's just added. I mean, it's enough to try and come up with your virtual lesson plan that most educators have had to deal with all this time. And I've got a couple of friends in the education system, and yeah, it's just been they got thrown into the fire, so to speak, in March of last year, and now it's about ready to go back. That comes with its own stresses and just being on the front lines, so to speak, in a group, in closed classes, inside, indoors, subject to all the different airflows and things that we've been taught, that we've learned over this last year, are the main contributors to the spread of COVID-19 and the novel coronavirus. This is it can be very stressful indeed.
Absolutely. I have many colleagues that are already, focused on going back to campus and yearning for it, and others that are really really quite reticent to do so. With for every logical reason, as you stated, we find ourselves in these situations where we're in classrooms and enclosed areas with maybe not the best ventilation systems.
Right.
And
right, 60-year-old air conditioning systems. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's it's probably not the best, and probably not the best filtrations either. Gee whiz, it's tough.
Yeah. So, and I know we're trying to make every advancement to upgrade our systems. EPCC, I think, has been very good about that. But it's still something that many people find very
daunting. I would
daunting.
guess. Yeah.
Yes, daunting. I was going to say, you don't want to use fear too often, right?
No.
But that's what it is. They're very fearful of what could happen and fearful of others. And that's, it's really interesting because it seems the polar opposite of everything that we used to do at the Border Learning Conference, where we see each other as one community activists and community activists, community servants. We had a lot of different elected public officials that would come in and speak during our conference, educators of different levels, administrators, staff, faculty. Everyone's hugging. Everyone's very, very, very boldly expressing how much they appreciate one another. And that's the kind of refresher that you need at a conference. However, it is interesting what we see now, how we're moving on to virtual learning and virtual platforms like these to hold our conferences and to still try to engage. But they're important because we absolutely need to continue to work together, see what innovative strategies others are using, learn from each other, and also for that camaraderie.
Sure.
I think that's the most important thing, because we do forget that, we expect most people to go back to work. But we don't think about how difficult that might be. It's really interesting to see too how some of the educational institutions have had some students in the class, and yet some are still virtual.
Right.
So you've got teachers doing kind of double duty, right?
Yeah.
And so, I really do. I commend every instructor out there who's returned to the classroom to attempt to do their best by their students, and I thank them. Right? What would we do without them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking with Crystal Robert, the steering committee chair of the El Paso Community College Border Learning Conference, taking place Thursday, April 8th through Saturday, April 10th. It is a virtual conference. You can learn more at borderlearningconference.org. In its 20th year, the first virtual, but this is interesting. You brought up you're going to have one of the people working on the COVID vaccines, and I imagine just from the topic we were just speaking of, that kind of apprehension of teachers to go back into a classroom, it's going to be important to learn some of the things, the aspects of the vaccines that we're just now learning, such as if you have the vaccine, you're pretty much incapable of giving COVID-19 to anyone else, and these are important factors to consider. I mean, you can get the vaccine, but if you could still catch the disease, you could pass it on to someone unknowingly. Just all sorts of factors to try and, assuage the fears of people going back into a closed classroom indoors.
Exactly. That's what we're hoping that our border health panel will help do. We have Dr. Jose David Burgos. He's one of the UMC hospitalists. He's and so hopefully we'll learn from him what strategies, what has the UMC done, what techniques have they've done, and what have they found makes their staff feel protected, feel comforted in these very difficult times. And then we'll also hear from Dr. Hector Ocaranza, who is our city county health authority. So this is the gentleman who has been the face of information and guidance against COVID-19. Yeah. So we're really hoping that the educators will have the educators and, educators and staff, because one thing I didn't press upon enough is that educators don't do this job on their own. They depend very heavily on staff. So and our staff is communicating with students almost as much and sometimes more than a faculty might. So they're in their offices face to face talking about a financial aid problem or counseling. And so how can we make our educational institutional community, those that work in the education institutions more comfortable when they speak to students, right? Because they're the first faces they see, and if they can't comfort an incoming freshman, right, then who can?
Right.
So how can we make them feel more comfortable about their jobs so that they can make the student experience favorable, right? Because that's higher education is can be, to use the word you used earlier, daunting. Yeah. Right, for so many, especially we know that at the community college level, we usually have a great deal of first time in college students, and because of our first time in college students, we want to make that transition from high school to higher ed as smoothly as possible, and we want to make sure that our staff is not afraid of speaking to our students because they're afraid of catching the virus. So we want everyone to feel safe when they're in our educational institutions, when they're in these communities.
Speaking with Crystal Roberts, the steering committee chair for the EPCC Border Learning Conference taking place Thursday, April 8th through Saturday, April the 10th. And we're talking, especially, it's wonderful to see for a conference that focuses specifically on border educators. Whether you are, primary, secondary education, a teacher teaching kindergartners, or as you're pointing out, a teacher teaching a college course, a professor. And I would imagine that this kind of thing, especially because you concentrate so much on the border and the different challenges we have just in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, this is something that probably does draw educators, especially border educators from around the country.
We have had border educators come in from different parts of our nation, and in last year we held our first binational panel where we spoke to higher ed educators from the University of Texas at El Paso Community College, and the UACJ of other educational institutions in Juarez.
That's great.
So that was a really exciting opportunity that we had to speak to our partners in education in our sister cities, because we're many of our students are from Juarez, and might be educated on the other side of the border and then come here for higher education. So it's important that we keep up these relationships and have a better understanding of each other.
In its 20th season, the El Paso Community College Border Learning Conference going on early this April, so the time is coming, and I know it's virtual, but how hectic is it to try and wrangle this thing, especially virtually? I know EPCC's got a certain amount of expertise. We've spoken to some folks who've done, job fairs and some of the different, certifications you can get through EPCC. But so there is experience, with EPCC to do these virtual things. But this is the first time for you, isn't it?
It is the first time, and I know this sounds kind of strange, but I always consider this a very touchy-feely conference where I'm not a big hugger. I'm not. But for one day out of the year, I will hug people. I will hug every person I see, and that's usually at the Border Learning Conference, just because it's a time where you're just kind of overwhelmed with joy and love and passion. It's just all the feelings at once, because we're just, you're speaking with other educators who care so much about their community, who care so much about education and the transformative power of education. and how much it can improve our communities, improve our lives. It is very different to go virtual, but we've had it's been interesting. However, I'm lucky to have with me a group of faculty and staff that I work with, that make that kind of seamless almost a seamless transition. We have the faculty that I work with on the steering committee has also worked on several different events that we've moved from face-to-face to virtual. So luckily we have that experience under our belts. As a matter of fact, and if you don't mind me saying so, I'm working with another group of faculty and staff, and we're also hosting Dolores Huerta on Thursday, April 1st.
That's tremendous.
Virtually. And so there's great benefit to it too. This is not, if we were trying to host Dolores Huerta at a face-to-face event, it may have been a bit more difficult. But since it's virtual, this is a unique opportunity that probably would not have been available to us previously.
I would imagine that one of the subjects you might end up covering, just as kind of the course of conversation, would be virtual learning itself, and what you're going to be able to take away for the future, because of the pandemic has kind of thrown us all into this thing where we're all doing things from our home offices or whatever. I would imagine there are going to be some things that you're going to want to do virtually moving forward, correct? Absolutely.
So if, just like we'd like to hear from our panelists from the Border Health panel, is telehealth here to stay, right? So
yes.
That's where you call into your doctor, probably far more convenient for some to do so, to check in with their doctors that way. That's something that we've learned from this quarantine that can continue on into the future and make things more convenient for others. Just like these virtual platforms, or actually meetings. If you don't mind my saying so, I kind of prefer going to meetings with my pajama pants on.
No, I don't, because I do the same thing. What would I have against that? I think America's in that. Right. I think America's with you right there. Jeez.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and I found also that I enjoy being a community advocate, and it was very difficult for me to attend all the meetings I need to attend, but I actually get to do that while still being present for my family. So, I can attend meetings. We can get in a quick call virtually, so you still see their face-to-face nonverbal communication and have a better understanding, but you don't have to travel a far distance to maybe meet with them. And our keynote speaker, Dr. Peter DeWitt, he is probably someone who we may not have been able to schedule, considering how many other events and organizations he travels to. We have these opportunities, and I hope that some of these things, maybe not all, that some of these things will continue.
This is tremendous. The Border Learning Conference taking place Thursday, April 8th through Saturday, April 10th. It is open to everybody. It's a $20 registration fee, but it's specifically for this year. We should point that out, I guess.
Yes.
This is something that is aimed toward educators. So if you're an educator at any level, whether that's primary or secondary education, in any kind of way, then this is for you. And this would apply, I would imagine, to trade schools as well as to colleges, universities, high schools, and elementary schools.
Absolutely, it would apply to trade schools. So that is something that we're learning. The more that the pandemic kind of isolated us and drove us apart, it made us also realize how much we all rely on each other and how much of our jobs are very similar. So EPCC does offer some courses, some degrees in that require that are very close to a trade school.
Yeah.
Because of that, we've had to see how to continue to engage students virtually.
Yeah.
Right? Because how do you handle a lab virtually?
Sure.
How do you write our auto programs, our auto
I was just thinking like a mechanic trying to,
yes,
master mechanic.
mechanics.
Right. Trying to teach his
Those
students, what lug wrench do you use to get a carburetor apart? Right. Yeah. I mean, how do you do that
exactly.
virtually? Sure.
Yeah, and how our pharmacy technicians, nursing. We have a state-of-the-art lab on our Rio Grande campus that helps students, but it still requires where students are able to see what a patient would look like, have the weight of the body and everything with this kind of plastic dummy, but you still need to be present to feel it, to hear the heartbeat, although it's on a mechanical dummy. You need that.
Sure.
So how do we do this virtually, or how do we go back to doing it face to face and still remain safe? Those are things that we've learned, that regardless of which education level that you're at, which educational institution you're at, we're as educators, we're all united on this in serving our communities and making better lives for everyone.
Well,
but how do we do that virtually?
This is what it's for. The 20th Annual Border Learning Conference, The Transformative Power of Education, is kind of, I guess, the theme of this year's conference, the keynote address by Dr. Peter DeWitt, talking mainly about mental and emotional health for educators as well as staff. And then you've got the Crossing Borders Award winner presentation. I know a friend of ours, Bob Moore, the winner. You told me this just before we started the interview last year. And this is, El Paso Matters, and what it's done in a single year of existence has been tremendous for both El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. And I look forward to seeing who the award winner is going to be this year. That's a big award.
Yes, this year we're hoping to honor our nurses who have been on the front lines. Unfortunately, many of our committee members and myself had family members who had COVID. Luckily survived. My stepfather luckily survived his fight with COVID. But during that time, the only communication we were getting was from the nurses, and they were the ones that made it a point to make sure that family members were still able to keep in touch with their patients, and just they've gone above and beyond, and any way that we can continue to honor them, particularly those nurses working in the COVID unit, to thank them for everything they've done for all of us and for our loved ones. We want to do that. So this year's Crossing Borders Award winner would be the COVID nurses.
Oh, that is tremendous. That is really tremendous. And yeah, I'm with you there. And I think most people, especially if you've had a family member or a friend, for that matter, who's undergone this and had to go into hospital. And I'm glad to hear that your stepfather came out okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we've all lost so much. But what kept us going, what kept us the hope going, even though sometimes we lose our loved ones, is the fact that we got to say goodbye. We got to communicate with our loved ones due to the help of the nurses who were there.
That is tremendous. The Border Learning Conference taking place Thursday, April 8th through Saturday, April the 10th. At different points throughout the day, you can go to borderlearningconference.org for the full schedule and all of the news that you need about when to tune in for what little specific subject that you might want to go off on, especially if you're an educator of any sort. But it is open to the public. It is $20 this year by virtue of the fact that, it is a virtual thing. So, right, that you've got a little extra overhead, I'm sure, to try and get this thing off the ground. But
yeah, we still have those any expenses not covered by the college. But also we like to give our participants as many treats as possible. So not only are you getting this awesome keynote speaker, the panel, all of our conference sessions, but we will also have raffle prizes from local businesses.
Oh, cool!
And our art, a couple members of faculty and staff of our art department at EPCC has created the first ever border calendario. And what that is it's a bit of a planner It's a calendar book with fun puzzles and drink recipes.
Oh, there you go. All right.
And food recipes that reflect the border. And just fun little things to do while you're home quarantining. So
that is tremendous. So that comes with it. And once again, you can sign up, borderlearningconference.org. Crystal, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Crystal Robert, the steering committee chair. And
thank you.
Thank you. This is the coolest thing. Like any good interview, you take a question and then you've got 10 more questions, and then you've got 10 more questions off of that. That's kind of what this is about, the Border Learning Conference. This is tremendous. Well, we appreciate your time, and thank you so much for spending some of it with us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was great to share this information with your audience.
And my thanks to you for listening. I look forward to speaking with you next week. I'm Duke Keith, and this is El Paso Townsquare. So long, everybody.